Have you ever noticed that moment when your arms suddenly become too short to read your phone? You stretch the text farther away. You squint, you borrow someone else's glasses. And then it hits you. Do I need the reading glasses now? For millions of people, that moment marks the beginning of a frustrating routine. Constantly searching for glasses, forgetting them at home, juggling multiple pairs, forgetting them at home, juggling multiple pairs, and feeling like your eyes have betrayed you. But what if I told you something remarkable? What if I told you something remarkable? What if the solution to blurring your vision wasn't a surgery, wasn't expensive lenses, and didn't require wearing glasses at all? What if it was just a simple eye drop? Today, I want to talk about a breakthrough that is changing the way we think about aging. Eyes. Eye drops designed to improve near vision and help people with presbyopia. Read again. Without glasses. And to truly understand why this is so exciting, we need to explore 5 key ideas. There comes a quiet moment in many people's lives that seems small at first. But it carries a surprising emotional weight. It might happen in a restaurant. You pick up the menu, glance at the small print, and suddenly the words seem softer than they used to be. You move the menu a little farther away, then a little farther. Maybe you tilt it toward the light. You blink, you squint, and for a second you wonder, is it just the lighting? Or perhaps it happens at home. You open a message on your phone from your child, or a close friend. The text is there, but it isn't as sharp as it used to be. So you stretch your arm out instinctively, as if distance will somehow fix the problem. And in that moment, a realization begins to settle in. Something has changed. For many people, this moment arrives sometime in their early 40s. Not because something is wrong with their health. Not because they did something careless with their eyes, but because of a quiet, natural process that every human being eventually experiences. Inside each of your eyes is a remarkable structure, a tiny transparent lens. When you were young, this lens was incredibly flexible. It could change shape effortlessly, adjusting in milliseconds, so you could focus on things near and far. A book in your hands, the dashboard of your car, the horizon outside the window. Your eyes handle the window, your eyes handle it all seamlessly. You probably never even thought about it. But over time, this lens begins to change. Slowly, gradually, almost invisibly after year. Almost invisibly, year after year, the lens becomes a little less flexible, a little more rigid. The muscle that once attacked the low marriage, the muscle that once attacked the TV, easily now struggle to bend it the same way they did decades before. And when that flexibility fades, something important happens. Your eyes begin to lose the ability to focus on objects that are close to you. Doctors call this presbyopia. But the name itself is not nearly as important as what people feel when it begins. Because when someone first realizes they cannot read the small print on their phone, or the label on a medicine bottle, or the instructions on a package, it often triggers a deeper emotional reaction. They think, is this what getting older feels like? Suddenly, something they never worried about before becomes part of daily life. They start carrying reading glasses in their pocket, leaving an extra pair in the car, keeping another pair on the kitchen counter. Glasses on, glasses off, glasses on again. Many people joke about it, but behind the humor there is often a quiet frustration. A teacher trying to read student papers in class. A chef checking measurements on a recipe. A mechanic examining tiny parts. Under bright lights, these are not unusual situations. These are not unusual. They are ordinary moments that happen every day to millions of people around the world. In fact, research from global vision organizations estimates that nearly 2 billion people live with presbyopia today. That means this experience, the stretching of the arm, the squinting at small text, the sudden search for reading glasses, is shared by an enormous portion of humanity. Think about that for a moment. Intergeneraciones discovering the same subtle shift in their vision. Doctors, artists, engineers, parents, grandparents, people in every country, every culture, every profession. And yet for many years, the message people heard was very simple. This is just part of aging. You'll need reading glasses now. So they adapted. They placed glasses beside their bed. They kept them in purses, desk drawers, and car compartments. Some even wore them on a chain around their neck so they wouldn't lose them. Life continued, of course. People adista. But that didn't mean the inconvenientes disappeared. If you have ever watched someone search for their glasses while they were already on their head, you understand how common this struggle can be. What makes presbyopia fascinating is that it doesn't mean your eyes are failing. What makes presbyopia fascinating is that it doesn't mean your eyes are failing. Your eyes are still capable of seeing clearly. The retina still captures images. The optic nerve still captures images. The optic nerve still carries signals to the brain. The entire visual system continues to function. The only difference is the lens has lost some of its youthful flexibility. A tiny mechanical change inside the eye, and yet it reshapes everyday life in ways people never expected. And when you truly understand this process, you begin to see something important. Presbyopia is not a flaw in the human body. It is simply a reminder that our bodies evolve with time. But for generations, the tool we use to deal with it stayed exactly the same. Glasses, magnifiers, stronger lenses, solutions that worked but never truly addressed the underlying challenge. People learned to cope with presbyopia, who deep down, many quietly wondered the same thing. What if there were another way? Now imagine waking up tomorrow morning and reaching for something different. Not your glasses on the nightstand. Not your glasses on the nightstand. Not the pair you keep beside your phone charger. Not the ones you carry in your bag, just in case. Instead, imagine picking up a small bottle, placing one drop in each eye, and continuing with your day. At first, that idea might sound almost unbelievable. For decades, people were told that once presbyopia begins, the only real solution is external help. Glasses, contact lenses, or surgery. The expectation became so normal that most people stopped questioning it. But something fascinating has been happening quietly in the world of vision science. Perceptionating has been happening quietly in the world of vision science. Researchers began asking a different question. What if we didn't try to replace the eye's natural system? What if we didn't try to replace the eye's natural system, but instead helped it work a little smarter? What if the solution wasn't about adding stronger lenses outside the eye, but about adjusting the way the eye itself focuses light? To understand this breakthrough, think about how a camera works. When photographers want to capture a clear image of objects at different distances, they often adjust something called the aperture, the small opening that controls how light enters the camera. When that opening becomes smaller, something interesting happens. More of the scene stays in focus. At the same time, objects that are slightly closer or slightly farther away can appear sharper. Objects that are slightly closer or slightly farther away can appear sharper. The same principle exists inside the human eye. At the center of your eye is the pupil, the dark circular opening that controls how much light enters. Most people know the pupil expands in the dark and becomes smaller in bright light. But the size of the pupil also influences how clearly the eye can focus on objects, at different distances. When the pupil becomes slightly smaller, the eye naturally gains what scientists call greater depth of focus. In simple terms, more objects remain clear without the lens needing to change shape as dramatically. This is where the idea behind modern presbyopia eye drops become so remarkable. Instead of surgically altering the eye, instead of permanently replacing the lens, these drops gently encourage the pupil to become smaller for a period of time. The change is subtle. Most people would never notice it in the mirror. But inside the eye, the effect can be powerful. With a slightly smaller pupil, the eye suddenly gains the ability to focus on near objects more clearly again. Words on a phone screen become easier to read. Labels on packaging appear sharper. Menus at restaurants no longer require the familiar stretch of the arm, and the most surprising part is how quickly this effect can happen. In many cases, people begin noticing clearer near vision. Within about 15 to 20 fito begin noticing clearer near vision within about 15 to 20 belia. That means someone could start their day struggling to read small text, and shortly afterward, find themselves scrolling through messages comfortably, again. For someone who has spent years relying on reading glasses, that moment can feel almost magical. Imagine sitting in a cafe with friends. The waiter hands you a menu filled with tiny print. Normally, this is the moment when you pause, reach into your pocket, or ask someone to read the specials for you. But today you simply glance down, and the words are clear. No blushes, no hesitation, no frustration. Moments like this might seem small, but they carry an emotional weight that many people understand deeply. Vision is not che, about seeing clearly. It is about independence. It is about confidence in everyday situations. When people begin to depend on glasses for simple tasks, they often feel a subtle shift in how they see themselves. They might joke about it, but inside the Santa must feel as though time is quietly reminding them that things are changing. So when a simple solution restores even a portion of their lost ease, the experience can be surprisingly powerful. And what makes this development so exciting is that it doesn't require a dramatical procedure. There are no operating rooms, no recovery periods measuring weeks, no permanent alterations to the eye. Instead, the approach works with the natural physics of vision. A tiny adjustment in the size of the pupil. A small shift in how light enters the eye. And suddenly the visual system gains an advantage it had slowly lost over time. Of course, these drops are not a miracle cure that stops aging altogether. The natural lens inside the eye continues its gradual changes as the years pass, but what these drops offer is something people have been searching for a very long time, a way to manage presbyopia that feels simple, flexible, and surprisingly natural. For someone who has spent years juggling reading glasses in every room of the house, the possibility of reaching instead for a small bottle of eye drops represents more than a medical innovation. It represents a glimpse of freedom people once believed they had lost forever. There is something deeply personal about vision. It is not just about letters on a page or numbers on a screen. Vision is how we experience the small moments that fill our lives. Reading a message from someone we love, glancing at a photograph that brings back memories, or looking down at a photograph that brings back memories, or looking down at a book while sharing a quiet evening at home. And when presbyopia begins to affect those moments, din presbyapetos momentes, the imp, act can feel surprisingly emotional. Many people don't talk about it openly. They laugh about forgetting their glasses or joke about getting older, but behind the humor is often a quiet frustration that shows up in everyday situation. Imagine a father sitting with his daughter at the kitchen table, helping her with homework. She pushes a worksheet toward him and asks, "Can you read this question?" He looks down and realizes the small print isn't clear anymore. So he reaches for his glasses again, the ones he had just taken off a few minutes earlier. Or imagine a woman standing in a grocery store aisle, trying to read the ingredients on the back of a product. She tilts the package toward the light, stretches her arm farther away, and sighs quietly when the words still seem fuzzy. These are small moments, but they happen again and again. Over time, they remind people that something about their body has changed. And this is why the stories emerging from people who have tried new presbyopia eye drops are so powerful. Because when you listen carefully, you realize the change they describe is not only physical, it is emotional. One ophthalmology clinic shared the experience of a man in his late 40s who worked as an architect. His job required him to study detailed blueprints, examine measurements, and constantly switch between paper drawings and digital screens. For years, his eyesight had been perfect. He never needed glasses. But then presbyopia arrived. At first, It was subtle. He noticed the numbers on technical drawings looked softer than before. Soon he found himself putting on reading glasses during meetings, then taking them off to look across the room, then putting them back on again to read small details. Glasses on, glasses off. Glasses on and glasses off. Glasses on again. It became a routine that slowed him down and made him feel strangely self-conscious. During presentations, he later described the feeling in a very honest way. He said, "It wasn't painful or dangerous. It wasn't painful or dangerous. It was just frustrating. Like my eyes suddenly weren't cooperating with me anymore." Eventuale matre. Eventualema, eventuse participeiro precabram testing presbyopia eye drops. On the first day, a doctor placed a drop in each of his eyes and asked him to wait for a short period of time. At first, nothing seemed differente. But about 20 minutes later, he looked down at a printed drawing in front of him, and something surprising happened. The tiny measurements along the edges of the blueprint were clear again. He looked closer, expecting the words to blur the way they normally did, but they stayed sharp. For a moment, he thought it must be a coincidence. For Fernando, maybe the lighting in the room was better than usual. So he picked up his phone and opened a message. The text was clear there too. No glasses, just his eyes. When he described that moment later, he didn't focus on the technical details of the drops or the science behind them. Instead, he said something that revealed how personal the experience had been. He said, "It felt like getting a piece of my independence back." That sentence captures something many people feel but rarely express. When presbyopia first appears, people often feel as if they have crossed an invisible line into a new stage of life. Carrying reading glasses everywhere becomes a quiet symbol of that transition. But when they suddenly realize they can read small text again without reaching for those glasses, something shifts inside them. It's not about denying age. It's about regaining simplicity in everyday life. Reading a menu in a restaurant without pausing. Checking a message on your phone instantly intending. Looking at a photo someone hands you without searching your pockets first. These moments may seem ordinary, but they carry a powerful emotional effect because they restore something people didn't realize they had lost. Ease, and when people talk about their experiences, you hear the same words again and again. Freedom, confidence, comfort. A woman who loved reading novels described sitting down with a book in the evening and realizing she didn't need to interrupt the experience by reaching for glasses. She said, "It felt like the store. It flowed naturally again." Another person described the traveling on a train and reading messages on his phone without worrying about whether he had packed his glasses. These are not dramática transformación. These are not dramatica transformación. They are small shifts in daily life. But when those small shifts happen dozens of times a day, they quietly reshape how people feel about their vision and about themselves. Because the ability to see clearly is tied to something deeper than eyesight. It is tied to independence. The simple confidence that you can move through the world without obstacles interrupting the flow of your day. And when people rediscover that confidence, even in something as small as reading a line of text, it reminds them that science is not just about solving problems. Sometimes it is about giving people back pieces of their everyday life they thought were gone. Whenever a new medical idea appears, especially one that sounds almost too simple, people naturally ask an important question. Does it actually work? And that question is not just wise, it is necessary. Because when it comes to our health, hope must always be supported by careful research, real testing, and honest results. Before any treatment reaches the hands of doctors or patients, it goes through a long journey. Scientists, the seek studies, doctors, monitor volunteers, and researchers measure results again and again to understand not only whether something works, but also how safe it is. The same careful process has been applied to these new eye drops designed to help people with presbyopia. Hundreds of volunteers participated in controlled clinical trials. These participants were people who share the same everyday struggle, difficulty seeing things up close, reading small text on a phone, looking at labels in stores, trying to focus on menus or books. Researchers asked these volunteers to use the drops and the sign, no measure their ability to read lines on a standardized eye chart, the same type doctors use during eye exams. The results began to reveal something encouraging. Many participantes experienced noticeable improvement in their near vision. In some cases, people who previously struggled to read small text were able to read 2 or even 3 additional lines on the eye chart after using the drops. If you've never taken an eye exam, that might not sound dramatic. After using the drops, if you have never taken an eye exam, that might not sound dramatic, but anyone who has sat in that examination chair knows how meaningful those lines can be. Each additional line represents a level of clarity that was previously missing. For someone who could barely read the larger letters before, suddenly recognizing smaller ones can feel like watching fog lift from a window. Even more interesting was how quickly many people noticed the effect. In several studies, participants began experiencing clearer near vision within 15 to 30 minutes after applying the drops. Think about that for a moment. A person could begin their morning struggling to read their phone screen, then shortly after using the drops, they could find themselves scrolling through messages or reading a news article with far less effort. And for many participants, the improvement lasted several hours. That meant that the drops could potentially be used at specific moments of the day when clear near vision mattered most. Someone might use them before work, before reading, or before attending an event where they knew they would need to look at small text frequently. Another important finding from these studies involved Vista's mission. Is seeing. One of the fears people often have is that improving near vision might make distant objects blurry. But many participants were able to maintain their normal distance vision while gaining sharper near focus. In other words, they could read a message on their phone unarmed. Durante la noche, they still look across the room without difficulty. Of course, no treatment is completely free from side effects, and responsible research always looks closely at those details as well. Some participants reported mild effects, such as temporary headaches, slight eye redness, or a brief feeling of dimness in low-light environments. These effects were generally short-lived and manageable for most people involved in the studies. For doctors, this balance between benefit and side effects is always a key part of evaluating a new treatment. Medicine rarely offers perfection, but it strives to offer meaningful improvement with acceptable risk. And in the case of these presbyopia eye drops, many specialists began to see something promising, a new option that did not exist before. For decades, the main tools for managing presbyopia remain largely unchanged. Reading glasses, bifocal lenses, contactal lenses, or surgical procedures that alter the eye's structure. Those methods helped millions of people, but they also came with limitations. Glasses could be misplaced or forgotten. Contactal lenses were not compatible for everyone. Surgery required a level of commitment that some people were hesitant to accept. The arrival of a Farmitura approach introduced something different: flexibilidade. Instead of committing to a permanent change, people could simply choose when they wanted extra help with near vision. And as researchers continue studying these treatments, new generations of eye drops are already being explored in laboratories and clinics. Some scientists are investigating formulas that may last longer throughout the day. Others are studying ways to reduce the side effects even further, or enhance the focusing effect. What makes this moment in vision science, particularmente physis moment in vision science particular exciting, is that it presents the beginning go a new direction, rather than relying only on XT. Tools like glasses, medicine is beginning to explore how subtle biological action inside the eye can restore clarity without a subtle biological, el huesta feel natural and adaptable. And behind every data point in those clinical studies is a real person. A teacher reading student papers. A parental papers apparent helping teacher with homework. A traveler checking directions on a phone screen. When scientists analyze charts and statistics, those numbers ultimately represent moments of everyday life becoming easier again. That is the deeper meaning behind medical research. It is not just about lines on an eye chart or percentages in a study. It is about understanding whether a simple idea, a single drop placed in the eye, can quietly improve the daily experience of millions of people who only want one thing: to see the world clearly again when it is right in front of them. As we reflect on everything we've explored, one truth becomes clear: vision is more than a physical ability. It is the gateway through which we experience our lives. It allows us to read the words of someone we love, to recognize the details in a photograph, to follow a recipe in the kitchen, or to help a child with homework. At the end of a long day. For many people, the arrival of presbyopia once felt like a quiet surrender to time. The moment when reading glasses became a permanent companion. The moment when something that once felt effortless suddenly required us Stinsons. But history shows us something remarkable about human progress. Again and again. Science challenges the limits we once accepted as permanent. Not by ignoring the natural process of aging, but by finding smarter ways to work with the body, support it, and restore what time slowly changes. The development of new approaches to managing presbyopia represents more than just a medical advancement. It represents a shift in how we think about everyday vision. Instead of assuming that blurry nearsight must automatically lead to a lifetime of dependency on glasses, we are beginning to see new possibilities emerge. Possibilities that are simpler, possibilities that are non-invasive. Possibilities that give people choices they never had before, choices they never had before. And perhaps the most inspiring part of this story is not the technology itself, but the freedom it can offer. The freedom to read a message instantly. The freedom to glance at a menu without hesitation. The freedom to enjoy a book, a photograph, or a handwritten note without searching for glasses first. These moments may seem ordinary, but they carry deep meaning because they restore ease to everyday life. When science gives people back that ease, it does something powerful. It reminds us that innovation is not only about machines or laboratories, it is about improving the simple experiences that make our days feel smoother, clearer, and more connected. The future of vision care is still unfolding. Researchers will continue exploring new treatments, improving existing ones, and pushing the boundaries of what we once thought possible. But even now, one thing is certain: we are entering a time when the story of presbyopia is beginning to change. A time when people may no longer assume that blurry near vision automatically means automatically. A time when a small drop, guided by decades of science and human curiosity, may help millions see the world more clearly again. And sometimes, the most powerful breakthroughs are not the loudest or the most dramatic. Sometimes they arrive quietly, one small drop at a time.